Washington's offensive line was one of the nation's best in 2022. Can they replicate that success in 2023? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Huskies, I am Tomashoff. That right over there, that's Lars Hanson. We are coming to you here on this Thursday afternoon for us. It's Friday morning for you when you'll be listening to this. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. Be sure you subscribe to us on all platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever else you get your podcast. We really want to thank you for the support. We're coming to the end of our first full week here, Lars, and the turnout that we've seen on social media through people reaching out to me, I'm sure some people reach out to you as well, has been really, really awesome to see the support. I've had people just send me pictures. Hey, look, we're watching you on the TV this morning. It's awesome. It's been really, really great to see that. We really appreciate your support. And we hope all you everydayers out there keep tuning in, keep listening to us every single morning. It's really, really awesome, especially with this, what could be a really, really big season for the Huskies right around the corner. And now, Lars, let's not waste any time here. Let's talk about the offensive line. And today we're going to start with the offensive tackles. We're going to talk about Troy Fautanu and Roger Rosengarten, who were two of the nation's best tackles in 2022. They both returned for the 2023 season. And are they still somehow underrated? I mean, if you look at some of these media personalities who talk about the NFL draft, you won't necessarily find either of them in a lot of people's top fives for the NFL draft in 2024. And are people sleeping on these guys?
I think a little bit, but I think also once the season gets going, and I think they show that they can do it for 2 seasons in a row. I mean, we know they can, but I think 2 full seasons and 2 seasons with this staff, especially because nobody really can look at the 21 season and say, hey, can we base anything off of that? Because nobody that played then is who they are now. Even Julius Puelo, who's playing at left guard, played in 2021. He's not the same kind of guy he was back then. So I don't think anybody's looking at that tape. And I think as a result, it's basically like they have 1 year tape on all these guys. So I think kind of the reason why is because there's not a full second season of tape to say, hey, we know this is a 2-year starter going into his 3rd year. He's going to be an absolute lockdown guy, even though that's definitely who they're going to be and who they're going to prove to be this fall. But they just haven't seen it. So I think that's why the attention hasn't necessarily been there.
No, that's a really great point, because I want to start with Roger Rosengarten, who was because he was just such a hype prospect coming out of high school. I don't know about you, but since we're both recruiting guys, that was one of just the most amazing high school tapes I've ever watched. The way he would just knock kids over and just stand over them and scream. There's really nothing quite like that. I can tell you want to say something about it. Please go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, because that was the one thing that stood out when you looked at him, is he was so athletic. And I know we always kind of throw that word around, but as an offensive tackle, he was running like a tight end almost. It was like, wait, this dude is big enough to be an offensive tackle, but kind of, fast enough and quick enough to be like, wait, this guy can be a flex out tight end if we really want to. So I think that's what popped off the tape for me, especially when I got to watch him at Valor Christian.
No, that's a great point. For me, it was just really all of that aggressiveness. Just that you see, like, people talk about, especially when you listen to people who cover the NFL draft, they talk about that mean streak, that nasty streak for offensive linemen, and how that's so important to just put guys in the dirt. I have never seen anyone do it quite like Roger. And in his first year as a starter, he made a couple of freshman All-American lists. And while he didn't necessarily earn any honors from conferences or from just the nation overall for his performance, I feel like that was a great start, especially because the one thing that I feel like a lot of people always forget when it comes to having a left-handed quarterback in Michael Penix is that that's his blind side. And Roger, I think he might have given up 1 sack, and that seems to maybe be pushing it. He really didn't allow much pressure last year at all. He's so fluid as an athlete. He's so aggressive, and he just gets out so quickly in the run game. He's so solid as a pass protector, and this is really going to be a huge year for him, where I feel like that by the end of the year, if he's on an All-American list, I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, no, he's certainly – I think it's just a matter of which team is he going to be on, first or second team. Because to your point, physicality, that Oregon touchdown against Oregon, the Wayne Talapapa just absolutely walked in with a cigar in his left hand, smoking in the left hand, running with the football in the right hand. Because Roger – you just see the freeze frame of that. Roger just absolutely blowing up the right side, the end, and the rest of the left side of the line kind of, okay, we're just going to push you guys over. But Roger is one-on-one on his guy and just absolutely owned him. So it's not, to your point, just a bit his ability as a pass blocker, but he can really do it all. And I think that's what's going to put him on those first and second team lists. Not just because, I mean, anybody, I think it's fair to say, can pass block in this offense. I think the way Ryan Grubb's scheme kind of works, it's more tailored towards not allowing sacks. You're able to get the ball out quickly. So that physicality in the run game is really what sets him apart from anybody else.
No, that's a really, really good point. And I can't say enough about just how fluid he is in the offense, because that's something where we always have to talk about 2021 and just the big comparison that we saw from 2021 to 2022. I swear, Husky fans, after this year, we're never going to talk about it again. I promise. Because getting 2 years of this system erases all doubt. But for now, with one full season under our belts, we have to make that comparison. There was nothing on the 2021 offensive line that looked even remotely as fluid, as athletic, as just proficient as what we saw in 2022. And Roger was a huge part of that. And so was the guy on the other side, Troy Fautanu. Now, I know on the other day, we talked about how Troy is viewed as an interior lineman by some, mainly due to his height and his arm length, which are both totally fair arguments to make. And I think that he could be a dominant interior offensive lineman at the next level. I want to give a shout out to my guy, Connor Rogers, who's a good friend, works over, I'll give a shout out to his podcast, NFL Stock Exchange with Pro Football Focus. He does great work over there, so he absolutely deserves a shout out. He had Troy Fautanu ranked as his number one interior offensive lineman for the 2024 draft. And I think that's a really, really great place to put him, because if you put him at left guard, right guard, where he was tried out a little bit there in this offense in 2021, and even in 2022, he had to move in there for a game or two, just one game, while Jackson Kirkland was working his way back from injury. Then they said, no, we need to keep Troy Fautanu at tackle. He does all the same things well that Roger does, but I don't know if I'd call him better than Roger, because I think Roger's a pure tackle, whereas Troy is just the better overall offensive lineman with some of the things that he's shown that he's able to do.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, to your point, I remember talking with Tyler Columbus, his old offensive line coach, former NFL lineman, offensive lineman with the Denver Broncos and Seahawks, where he said that Rodgers actually more of a left tackle, but he's just having to play on the right side because Penix is a left-handed quarterback, as you mentioned. So he's really, to your point, kind of, he is a tackle. It's just a matter of which side, kind of like Caleb McGarry, when that's the kind of comp that I like to think of for Roger Rosengarten, except I think Roger might be a little bit better because he can do both left and right. Caleb was a little more tailored towards just the right side. Troy, I think, is kind of like a little bit better than Nick Harris in the all-around offensive lineman category, if you understand that, where it's like he can play 2 or 3 different positions, but you're not necessarily going to say like he is going to be the number one offensive lineman on your board, but he's going to, if you want him at 2 or 3 different positions, he's going to be that guy that's always going to be in one of those 3 positions.
Right. He's so technically sound, and he's someone who you can always just kind of rely on no matter where he is on the offensive line. And I mean, he's also a guy who plays with a really, really high motor. And you know what else is really good when it comes to just talking about motors? eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Husky fans, let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. All right, Lars. Now, let's talk about the interior of the offensive line. Really quick, I just want to touch on how awesome this group was in 2022, because we saw just so much success from Jackson Kirkland at left guard, Corey Luciano at center, and Henry Bayanivalu at right guard. All of those guys have now graduated and have moved on. And as of right now, it looks like the starting 3 is going to be Julius Buelo at left guard, Mateo Mele at center. We'll get into what might be a position battle at left guard because we've seen some different guys playing there. There's a lot to discuss there. Mateo Mele at center is locked in. The coaching staff is in love with Mateo Mele and what he's been able to do for this offense. And then Nate Caleppo at right guard is also just seemingly a lock for the position. And he has had an incredibly steady and just efficient fall camp. And I feel like we need to start there so then we can just kind of go through Mele and Caleppo really quick, and then we can spend more time talking about the one position where it feels like Buelo is really close to having the starting position on lock, but there's still some guys that are pushing for that spot. So Nate Caleppo, former 4-star from nearby Rainier Beach, he got a couple of chances to fill in on the offensive line last year, played really well when his number was called, and the coaching staff just seems really comfortable with him at guard right now. And I feel like if there was an injury at tackle, he might end up getting pushed out there and somebody else would come in and play his spot on the interior. But he's just somebody who he needed to learn how to pass block when he got to when he got to college, because being 6'6" and 340 pounds in high school is awesome because all you need to do is just push guys. That's it. It's not necessarily the same when he gets to college. So he's come a really, really long way as a pass protector. Shout out to offensive line coach Scott Huff, who is one of the best coaches in the country at the position and has done just such a good job with that. And I feel like this offensive line, because there's a lot of talent in the middle of this line, and I feel like it could even end up being better than last year. And I think Caleppo and Mateo Mele is where that starts.
I agree. I mean, I think for me, I flip-flop that. It's for me because last year where the success started was Corey Luciano and his veteran presence, because he was a second-year starter there, and that made a huge difference for Mike to be able to have a veteran under center. Like, hey, we already have a pretty good connection here, and they didn't have a relationship prior to when Penix came here, so it was just like two veterans were able to come together, and I think that's kind of what the same situation has been this fall. Mateo was able to get some time last year when Luciano was when the game was already out of hand, and he got a couple other games previously. He actually got a start at center at Arizona in 2021 a couple of years ago, I want to say. I'm not sure exactly which season was, but I know he got the start at Arizona because it's his home state. But I think it's carrying over from last season where it's that veteran relationship between the two. That's what allowed Mateo Mele, that and his size. I think that's also pretty clear. Mateo's a lot bigger than Corey Luciano, but I think Corey kind of what he lacked in size, he made up for with the veteran understanding and kind of the mental approach. I think Mateo, he's still kind of working up towards as much knowledge as Corey had, but I think that'll come, especially by the end of September. I think he'll pretty much be locked in on that. The reason why he's been able to win the job was just because his relationship with Michael was pretty rock solid, and that's what matters most in this offense, because there's only one guy that touches the ball besides Michael Penix on every single play, and that's the center. So in this case, Mateo Mele. You're not going to put it, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later. We like Parker Brailsford, but you don't want to put a redshirt freshman in that situation when you're trying to chase the national championship.
That's a great point. And something that Scott Huff told us in the spring is that he was really comfortable with everything Mateo did physically and even his knowledge of the offense. But what he really wanted to see him do better was be a leader and take command of the room. And that was something where it took, especially because Mateo's a guy who and we have to remember, he hasn't just played center. He's played guard. He's played tackle. He's played every position along the offensive line. So when you're where you don't really know where you're needed, I understand why you might just kind of be like, yeah, no, I'll do what's asked of me when my number is called, but might not necessarily be a natural leader right off the bat when you're kind of just unsure of where you're going to be asked to play. But it seems like this fall, he really has stepped up and really has taken command of a lot of what's going on in this offense. And especially, like you said, when this team wants to chase a national championship, because Mateo is a sixth-year senior now. So he needs to be that veteran presence. And to his credit, he has grown in that regard a significant amount, even from just the spring until now.
Yeah, I had the story up on Sports Illustrated Inside the Huskies on our countdown, or at least my countdown of the top 10 returning players, and I'm going to air quotes returning because somebody pointed out today the one that I released today is not a returning player, but what are you going to do? That Scott Huff mentioned that he really has seen that leadership. He saw it actually in the summer, is when Mateo started taking leadership of the group, going through workouts with guys, and I think what allowed Mateo to be a leader the way that he wants to be is actually when you learn all those positions, you become a natural teacher because you had to learn those positions at one point in time or another, and now you've gotten to see other guys do it. and now you get to go do it on the field. So he's the best person these guys can be learning from next to Scott Huff. And again, when you have two veteran bookends on the outside, I think that's what matters most because, yes, you can have debates about right guard and left guard, but I think the three key positions are left tackle, center, and right tackle. And those three all have the veteran and veteran guys on this front.
No, that's a really great point. And now we have to move on to Julius Buelo. And for the lack of a better term, what still kind of feels like a battle there. Because Julius Buelo right now seems to be the starter, but guard Memelar seems to be nipping at his heels a little bit. And now it just, you talked about Parker Brailsford a little bit, how much the coaching staff really seems to love him. Even though he came in as a center, he's probably going to be a center. And also it speaks to somebody we'll talk about in the next segment, Landon Hatchett. But it's something where if they love him, even though he is a little bit undersized and he is a younger player, he's just a redshirt freshman coming off a knee injury that I believe he suffered somewhere towards the end of his high school career, or maybe right when he first got to UW, but he doesn't necessarily have a lot of experience even practicing under his belt. And it took a while for him to get healthy and to just kind of get into the swing of things, but now he's fully there. And one thing that stands out to me about Parker's game is how powerful he is for his size. But Julius is another former four-star recruit who struggled when he was asked to play in 2021, started, I believe, 5 games that year, and lost his job. And it's taken him a while. He's leaned out a little bit. He's really been in the weight room. He's gotten a lot of praise from his teammates for how hard he's worked this offseason to get his body into shape and to make sure that he's ready to seize the opportunity when his number gets called again. And go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, because I think the point on that, I wanted to add on that is the fact that Scott Huff wants all of his offensive linemen to be well-rounded offensive linemen. So I don't think it actually hurt that he got that early playing time because everyone kind of did bad that year. I think what matters most, and coaches will tell you this, it doesn't really matter necessarily how you did. It's the fact that you got on the field and you have that experience. I think that's kind of what's giving him the edge now to where he's able to learn this system better. He had a whole year to learn it last year. And I think he's kind of been able to just have that little bit, those 5 games, I think is what's giving him the edge over guard right now.
I agree. So we talked about Parker. We talked about Buelo. We do need to talk about guard because he is so just perfectly fit to play the position, especially when, not so obvious reasons like his first name. But it's something that he is just everything you want in an interior offensive lineman. He's strong. He pulls in the run game really well. And he's just, we saw it in the spring. He's got that attitude, man. Like we talked about with Roger Rosengarten. He is just a physical presence who is not afraid to just come downhill and just blow you up in the run game. And he's a staunch pass protector now too, because that's something that is the hardest thing for a lot of high school offensive linemen to learn is to learn how to pass protect. And now that he's gotten to that point, he's somebody who could make an impact. And whether he's first string, we'll talk about the second string in the next segment. Speaking of second segment, tune in next week because we're going to start with the edge rushers because that's just such a fantastic group to watch. And just like the second string offensive line, there's a lot to like there too. But it's something that guard he's an exciting player to watch. And he's somebody where I don't think that a lot of casual fans will be like, oh, look at number 64. That dude's a really, really proficient player. But it's just something where, oh yeah, there's not a lot of interior pressure coming to this game. Oh yeah, that's because of guard. And he's just that kind of player where he's not going to be noticed. It's not necessarily like it's never going to show up in the stat sheet as an interior offensive lineman, but he's the kind of guy who will always seems like he'll get the job done.
Well, I think that's also why Scott Huff had him as his first take. I forgot which class he came in, but he was the first. He was over a year committed before guys started actually getting recruited at the other position. So Scott Huff out of Idaho identified him early on. I think that's kind of to your point. He wasn't a big 4-star guy. He wasn't a big. I think he only had 2 offers before he shut his recruitment down. It wasn't that he got 2 offers total. It just kind of was like, hey, look, we want you. I want you. It was a match made in heaven, and they went with it. And he never looked back since. And I think it's, again, we're all talking about this natural fit at guard. I think at some point, no matter what time it comes, whether it's this year, midway through the season, or even next season, guard is going to take over that spot. I think it's a matter of when, not if.
No, that's a great point. And just real quick, as we wrap up here, just want to point out that remember guard got a lot of SEC offers towards the end of his high school recruitment, and he's just a solid player that everybody was really interested in, but he came to Washington. All right, now it's time to move on, and we're gonna go a little bit of rapid fire here as we move along. But I want to start with the second string, and I want to point out, because one thing that's really, really important to talk about, because we talked about how great Troy Fautanu and Roger Rosengarten have been. We kind of need to talk a little bit about the backup tackles. RJ Wersch is somebody who's gotten a lot of reps at left tackle. They've moved him to right tackle in the past, week and a half or so. Just kind of like Scott Huff talked about, just that flexibility, that versatility to play anywhere where you might be asked. Transferred Jalen Clem has seen some time at tackle. They're definitely trying to work him in a little bit at guard as well. But one guy who Gary Hatchett is another name who needs to be mentioned as somebody who they love anywhere on the offensive line. He's played left guard, he's played right guard, he's played right tackle. Somebody who has played a lot of different positions, but somebody who's really, really impressed is Garen's little brother, Landon Hatchett, who has mainly played center, played a little bit at guard, but he's just really, really impressive for a true freshman who enrolled in the spring. He already really seems to have just almost a grip on a second team spot at this point.
Yeah, actually, when I talked to Urian about it, because I was asking him about how his work is at right guard and right tackle. I asked him about how well is Landon, kind of how many questions is he asking me? Like, well, when he enrolled early in the spring, because he came early in the spring, about halfway through, he was able to come to practice for the first half, but he wasn't able to participate or suit up because he wasn't enrolled yet. So once he got to, he only had like 7 or 8 practices, I think, on the back half. But he had enough. He was asking a lot of questions, and Gurian said he's asking really none now because he's already grasped it so much. It didn't even surprise Gurian how well he is already immersed in the offense. Again, still has a long way to go. Don't think about penciling him in the 2 deeps yet, but don't be surprised if his name does pop up on the 2 deeps at some point. And that's really a testament to him, because we've seen guys struggle to kind of pick up the offense, whether it's this offense or any offensive lineman in general, kind of just coming in. Usually it takes them a couple of years to really find their footing. Even Gurian, it kind of took him about a year and a half to really find his footing, find the right side. Because again, the thing with Gurian was he could play 5 different positions, so it was a matter of Scott Huff saying, okay, which 2 or 3 do I want to try you at for the most part? Because coaches don't need to put 5 guys in 5 different positions, because you're not going to learn anything. You're not going to be able to pick up everything. You need to kind of start tailoring towards one side or the other. And I think Gurian has kind of found his on the right. Landon's is right there in the middle. He can kick over left guard if he needs to, but he just looks and seems like a natural center, a guy who really can anchor an offensive line from the inside out, can lead the team, because he also played, I believe, defensive line in high school, same as his brother. So they both know how to handle the line on both sides of the ball. And I think that's also kind of helped both of them, and especially Landon in his first fall camp.
Also, big respect to Landon, who also played high school baseball and just hit tanks. And as somebody who's also a baseball guy growing up, I respect that. And now we kind of have to talk a little bit about recruiting, because we covered it a little bit in our recruiting episode. Go listen to that one if you haven't already, and subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever else you get your podcast. Please, we really appreciate it. Leave us a 5-star review as well. Those are also very helpful. But we just talked about Landon, who obviously is a true freshman. And then we can talk about the rest of the class that just got brought in. That's Kaylee Tiffai, Sione Fasolo, and Elisha Jaquette, who all they have a very special just body type, or very rare body type and Jaquette is the guy where it really we talked about this at the open practice on Sunday, where it's, look at how just tall and skinny this kid is. He can put on so much weight, and it still seems like he can move really well. And Scott Huff has done such an awesome job of recruiting body types. And the one guy that I really want to talk about in this segment, when it kind of comes to that point, is Paki Finau, 4-star from Oak Hills in California, and is just somebody where you watch his film, and he kind of looks like a combination of Troy Fautanu and Roger Rosengarten. And I apologize for just kind of saying that, because I feel like that's going to put unreasonable expectations on this kid. But it's something where you just watch not only how powerful he is, but just how fluid he is as a mover. And it's, wow, okay, this is a kid who looks like he's a little bit lighter right now. And then you can just look at some of the other guys that Scott Huff has taken over these past couple of classes, and in this class as well. We talk about Ignacio Tupu, who's somebody who hasn't committed yet, but seems like he might be a Husky lean at this point in time. And that's somebody who you can also just kind of say, yeah, this is another just big, rare body type who, if he pans out as somebody who's, a low-rated 3-star guy, that's a huge win for the Huskies if you get that kind of kid to commit.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of why Scott Huff goes for body type over, maybe projection, because if you can take an athletic guy, kind of going back to the point about Roger Rosengarten, you could just see it. You could see the athleticism. You knew it wasn't a guy where, some offense, you look at the 21 offensive line, that thing was big. It was clunky. It was not good at all. And I think for that reason, that's why Scott Huff kind of got away from what got him there in the first place, which is finding these big, tall, athletic guys who you can play in multiple positions. And this class, you mentioned Ipaki is that exact kind of guy, to where he plays on the right, plays on the left. It doesn't really matter because he is a built and bred offensive lineman. You just kind of look at him and say he could really play in a number of positions. And Scott would rather have that guy with versatility versus, okay, well, he's a 5-star. I'm not saying they don't go after 5 stars, but it's like if you're just saying, oh, I'm just going to be a left tackle, it's like, okay, well, I can work with that, but it's not actually what suits my system best. And what suits my system best is a versatile, multiple offensive lineman.
No, that's just such a great point, because this is something that Scott, when we talked to the media the other day, I swear he went on for 5 straight minutes just talking about how much he preaches versatility and just how important it is to him and how important it is to the offense as a whole to just have everybody know how to play multiple positions. And he just kind of went down the list and basically went through everybody on the roster and said, yeah, we're comfortable with this guy at these positions, this guy at these positions, and this is why we love this is why we love that, about this flexibility, about this versatility. And it was really, really cool to listen to, because that's just kind of exactly what we're kind of going to cover here as we wrap up, is looking ahead. And yes, there's so much to be covered about the 2023 season. I really wanted to make sure we covered this looking ahead segment in every single position group, because that's very important. We're going to spend hours and hours and hours of your time, so make sure you keep tuning in, talking about the 2023 season and what it's going to look like. But this coaching staff always needs to be prepared for what's next as well. And that's something where, especially with a host of guys we just talked about, Parker Brailsford, Landon Hatchett, Geary Hatchett, RJ Wersch, Jalen Clem, we keep going, Elijah Jaquette. You keep going down the list of, oh yeah, they're comfortable with this guy here. They're comfortable with this guy here. We as the media have seen some of it of, oh yeah, look at this guy and the way he's moving. Oh wow, he looks really strong. And it's when you say, oh no, we're not just waiting for this guy to get his shot at left guard or for this guy to get his shot at center. That just goes miles, not just for the offensive line, but for the quarterback, for the running backs, where they say, okay, I know that if this guy is at any of these 3 positions, I can trust him to get the job done. And that's part of what I feel like has created such a cohesive offense.
Yeah, and I think the other point to that is when guys do go down, or when you lose guys for whatever reason, whether it's transfers, whatever, you need to have multiple guys so you can say, okay, well, these 3 guys could fill his one spot if he leaves. Because if you get to a point where it's, oh no, we only have one other body type, now we got to go into the portal and kind of freak out. I mean, when they got Jalen Clem, that filled up the offensive line room. So that was a cherry on the top. That wasn't oh no, we need to find an emergency stopgap. And, yes. And also Scott Huff was somebody he had previously recruited, years and years ago out of Pennsylvania, back in, I believe, 2021 or 22. I can't remember which class it was, but that was kind of the point. Is we're like, okay, let's just fill up the room. Let's manage it, because we already know what we have in the bodies coming in, and we already have on the roster. So I think it's just a matter of making sure that the numbers always stay up, and that's why they haven't had a drop off.
No, that's a really great point, because Clem is also somebody where you take that guy 10 times out of 10. I'm sorry to everybody out there, but as a Patriots fan, I have to get in my 10 seconds of Adrian Clem is a fantastic offensive line coach. We've already seen what he's done just as somebody who keeps very close tabs on the Patriots. And because I feel like people would rather hear me do that than praise Oregon. So, if we have to go down one of those 2 roads.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
But it's something where we saw how good of an offensive line coach he was in just 1 year with the Ducks. So it's something where when you can have somebody who he's coached his entire life to get to this point, why not make that take? I want to thank Lars. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody who's tuned in so far this week. All you everydayers out there, make sure you keep tuning in, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts. We really, really appreciate all the support. Please keep leaving comments in the YouTube. I've seen some great questions so far that come through down there. We will definitely get to some of those whenever we get a chance, wherever we find a good way to work those in. We'll probably end up doing some mailbags as well down the line. But, for now, just stay tuned in. We really appreciate all your support. Like, comment, subscribe, 5-star rating. Last time, tune in for Edge Rushers on Monday. We'll talk to you then.